Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy hump day. Thank you for listening to the show, whether you're dialing in at America One Radio, weekdays, 9 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. This from WSB-TV last night.
And now a Channel 2 Action News exclusive. We've learned a new push by Georgia's Senate Republicans could restrict advanced early voting to just one location per county.
What?
Channel 2's Richard Elliott is live at the state capitol where those Republicans say they're still working on this bill. Richard.
Democrats got wind of this early this morning. Senate Republicans took a simple voting-related bill that passed the House. They stripped it out and put it back together again with some of these controversial provisions. One would limit advance voting to just one location per county. Some county elections officials aren't happy about it.
That's nuts.
This is a look at the new House Bill 397. It was once a simple bill that dealt with Saturday voting, but now Senate Republicans have tacked on a number of other provisions, some of them controversial. It would eliminate counties from setting up multiple early voting sites, instead requiring early voters to go to one centralized location. Given that 71% of Georgia voters voted early, that's a concern for Paulding County Elections Director Deidre Holden.
It's disenfranchisement at its best because our voters depend on that. Not everybody's schedule allows them to vote on Election Day.
Right.
Some don't want to vote by paper.
Atlanta Democratic State Senator Jason Estevez thinks the idea of limiting advanced early voting to a single location would lead only to long lines and frustrated voters.
Yep.
That's going to restrict the number of people who participate in early voting, which will mean that more people will vote the day of the election.
I'm looking forward to 397. I think it's got some good components. I know we worked hard on that.
Sylvania Republican State Senator Max Burns supports what he's seen, even the section on limited advanced early voting, but he admits the bill is still a work in progress and he wants to see the finished product.
At the end of the day, I need to look at the current version. I've seen some early versions, and I know that everyone's a little bit interested, and we hope to get it out hopefully this evening.
By the way, he lives in Sylvania, Georgia, population 2634, 2,634 people. And by the way, in Screven County, let me get you the population of Screven County, Georgia as well. I mean, we're talking about 14,000 people. That's not hard. One voting location for early voting in Screven County. No big deal for Mr. Max Burns and his constituents in that county. There are 14,000 people that live within, I don't know, a half-mile radius of where I am right now. And that's just that small little blip on the map in Fulton County. One location ain't going to work for Fulton County. Not going to work for Paulding County. Not going to work for Gwinnett County. Certainly not going to work for Cobb. Not going to work for Rockdale. Not going to work for DeKalb, Fayette, Douglas. I can go on and on and on. This is an asinine addition to an election bill. Let me let the story wrap real quick.
Now, this bill would also require poll workers at each individual precinct to hand count ballots during an election, a rule that the Republican-dominated state election board tried to implement right before the election last November, but they couldn't because the courts intervened. There could be a committee hearing on this new bill sometime tomorrow afternoon.
Joining me to discuss this and the push for hand-marked paper ballot usage in the state of Georgia from the Coalition for Good Governance, Marilyn Marks. Friend of the show. She's been on many times. In fact, you may be one of those. You're getting close to the golden jacket like they hand out at Saturday Night Live after 5 appearances.
Oh, excellent. I can't wait.
Well, no, actually what I do is I do coffee mugs. So I'll have to get you a coffee mug at some point in time. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Where did this idea, not that the idea is new, but where did this push to centralize early voting to one location in each county in the state of Georgia, where did this come from? And how does a guy from Sylvania, Georgia, Screven County, population 14,000, where does he get off thinking that that's going to work in a county that has 100 times as many people?
Well, I would ask you, what makes you think he thinks it would work?
Well, I don't think he cares. I mean,
that's the point.
I don't mean to be so callous and hyper partisan, but this sort of stuff, this is designed to suppress election turnout.
Oh, it could not be more clear. They're shameless about it.
I'm just so
You're
weary of
absolutely
this. I'm just so weary. Yeah, she and I were texting last night, y'all, and I mean, I went off on this like pessimistic West Wing like rant. Everyone, and I don't know if I was just tired from the end of the day or just I was so burned out from all the signal stuff, and I'm like, man, this country's so screwed. But so I apologize for that. But yeah, I mean, voters keep letting that party get away with this stuff, or at least trying to, or not punishing them for it.
absolutely. Well, and we are the only little group that said anything about it yesterday.
It's hard to find it in the media. I mean, the article or the story I got from WSB TV is the one thing I really see. There's not a whole lot of discussion about this on any of the print outlets or even the online outlets.
Exactly. And, to me, this was, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 important points of this proposed legislation.
Yeah.
If you think about it, is not only, of course, it's super partisan because it would mean, as my friend Jean Dufort, who's the chair of the Morgan County Democrats, said, Maryland, a Democrat could never win a large state or regional election now because if this law were to go through, because all of the early vote concentration trying to get into one location in a county, it would just cut turnout so much. The question is, was it intentional? How could it be anything else?
Yeah, how can it not be intentional? I mean, clearly.
How can it not be intentional? Exactly. And certainly Senator Burns didn't deny it. He said he liked that part. But, we will see today whether or not they got any pushback yesterday and whether they are bold enough to keep that in the draft that they circulated yesterday. And that would just so your listeners really know that this would cut down to one location per county.
It's insane.
The early voting locations.
I mean, it's insane. Look, I mean, I go to vote at the Ponce Library when I early vote, and usually, and there's almost always a wait just at that one location, and we have 2 weeks and weekends and extra. I mean, we have plenty of time to do it, but there are always still lines at that location.
Right, and imagine all of the early voters trying to drive downtown, park, and vote in one office downtown. People are just not going to do it.
No. Well,
they couldn't afford to take the time, or many of the people, it would be a financial burden to them.
I remember when the COVID election cycle happened, and they were using State Farm Arena or Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Even if you did use a venue of that size to limit the one location, the one day, et cetera, and so on, it would be a traffic snarl. It's already a traffic snarl. When there's a football game, a bowl game, or a basketball game, or a concert, or something going on at both venues, when there's something like that goes on, it's a pain in the rear to get there, to park, and get out, and this is a non-starter. And surely there are going to be some Republicans who just can't abide by this, right? I mean, are you getting a sense that there are some Republicans in some exurban counties of some certain size that might go, ooh, that's a logistical nightmare even for Forsyth County?
Well, let's start with the Democrats. Let's hope they say something.
Oh, God. Yeah, please tell me we're not having a problem with Democrats on this. I mean, I've not seen
any of them say anything about this. When we saw the various talking points that were sent out to from the progressive groups yesterday and party officials, they didn't mention it. And so that's why we sounded the alarm.
So this is like an add-on to an existing bill. What else does this existing bill provide? Is there something positive about it that we can go, at least we're getting that?
No, you're going to wish you didn't ask that question.
All right.
So there was one provision left in the bill. It was the bill that crossed over. HB 397 is the bill we're talking about. And it crossed over, and it has now become the vessel, if you will, for putting anything related to elections into it. And the one provision that was in there, and I'm not saying one good provision, just the only thing that was in there was a no good, very bad, horrible provision that unfortunately was backed by the Democrats, and they definitely got the Republicans on their side for this. And this bill was to permit either the Speaker of the House, John Burns, or the President of the Senate, Burt Jones, to unilaterally fire and replace their member of the Board of Elections, the State Board of Elections, if the General Assembly was not in session. So 9 months out of the year, either Speaker Burns or Lieutenant Governor Jones could, without pause, completely unilaterally, completely without public oversight, without the General Assembly's they could yank the person out of the position at the state election board and put their second cousin in. And remember that Speaker Burns would, of course, be likely running for re-election, and Burt Jones is going to run for governor, most likely. I mean, you don't put a candidate in a position of being able to manipulate the state election board.
Marilyn, that is so, 8 years ago? Come on, we had... we had a then Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, overseeing his own election for governor. Come on, this is child's play. We've done this before.
Yeah. And so we wanted to codify it, I guess. And no, this is a bill that was brought by the Democrats. Some Democrats did vote against it. And, from the MAGA friends that I talked to say, well, they're going to hand that power to us. We'll take it. We'll fix the policy. It's a terrible policy, terrible public policy, but we will fix it later. Give us this power now if you want to. And, we'll make it a better policy when we get what we want. But it was really interesting. It was not pushed by the Republicans. And so that provision is the only provision that is in the bill as it stands. And then what we saw yesterday that I sent out in the press release is a substitute or amendment that would be voted on presumably today. Now we could see it change today. The meeting at 5:00 this afternoon,
right?
And we could see it change today. But anyway, you were saying, did we get something good in this bill? No.
And am I reading this right? This has the work of Representative Sarah Draper.
Yes.
She was. In fact, I'm reading from the Georgia Recorder, the architect behind the proposal for removing Georgia election board members.
Yes.
I don't get it. I don't get where we the people benefit from this. I certainly don't get where the Democratic Party benefits from this. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. There are people that have had all sorts of speculation about, whether it makes it easier to, in the meantime, remove some people that may not be favored by the Democratic Party. But that's not the way to set policy.
But I mean, is the thinking that and I apologize. I'm just trying to think here. Is this empowering the level-headed Georgia Republicans? The Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger wing of the party. Is this empowering them to be able to remove, I don't know, one of the MAGA 3 by chance?
Well, the way some people see it, but also Burt Jones has got that power as well.
Right. I was going to say he's the one right now who's got the keys to do it.
That's right. That's right. But it doesn't matter. I don't care if you were removing Hitler himself. This is bad policy.
Yeah.
Just really should not permit that kind of thing to happen. In the vast majority of county election boards, Ron, if you wanted to remove a bad apple from a county election board, what you have to do is you have to have cause. You have to go to court and prove that person really did something that was wrong, that was appropriate for having them removed. The court has to agree that it is for cause, and then that individual has due process rights, and, can defend themselves and can appeal if the judge gets it wrong. That's what we kind of need to remind ourselves in this country, that due process matters, and it matters for both parties and all of us.
No, it doesn't. We're just going to send somebody to an El Salvadoran prison and let them get a free haircut. Come on.
Right.
Due process. Who are you kidding? We're with Marilyn Marks from the Coalition for Good Governance. I'm dumbfounded by this. I'm trying to, in fact, I'm racing over to social media now to see if Representative Syra Draper has decided that she doesn't want anything to do with this bill. I know Senator Jason Estevez is making the full court press on the Democratic side to say, no, do not touch this. This is toxic. We don't want this.
On the voter, on all of this amendment that came in,
Right.
he certainly, and thank goodness he's leading the charge on that. So yeah, that's really good. Now, I've not seen whether or not she has commented on these new things. I would love to see her rethink her position on what was in that original bill 397. That
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, obviously, this is an amendment that has sort of poisoned whatever original intent I think she thought she was going for here.
Well, now that the language that she had recommended has not changed. Nothing has changed about that. That stays. And then we will see whether the amendments today that get perhaps voted on and incorporated, whether or not that language disappears. I hope that the Democrats will make amendments to take her provisions out.
Yeah,
Because
sorry, ma'am. I don't see the benefit in this, and I'm bewildered. I got to take a quick break. We're with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, and we're talking about some of the legislation that's eking its way through the legislature right now that should be concerning to Georgia voters. The Ron Show returns in just a second on America One Radio. Incidentally, you can always reach out to The Ron Show, 404-919-2725. You can call. I usually don't answer, but you can leave a voicemail because I have another job. You can text. You can email the show, ron@ronshowatl.com. Hit me up on your preferred social media platform at ronshowatl, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, Substack. I think I got it all. Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, joining us. There was we were talking about HB 397, which has Democratic fingerprints on it inexplicably. I don't really understand the point of this. But also now, Max Burns from Screven County has decided that it would be a good idea to limit early voting to one centralized location in each county. And I believe we're down to 1 day to do that versus 2 weeks and multiple locations for counties that need that. We've covered that, I think, in full. There's also, you mentioned this in the press release, there's also a provision that addresses absentee ballot delivery as well, correct?
Right. And we're talking about mail ballots, people who get their ballots in the mail and prefer, like I do, to hand deliver those ballots to the central office where they're going to be counted. I learned a long time ago in this election business that, if you want the least chance of your ballot to go through any mischief or rejection or lost in the mail or whatever, to hand mark your ballot, of course, so that there is a permanent record of your intent, and cast it as close to election day as possible and as to the place it will be counted. In other words, shorten that distance, shorten the risk of anything going wrong. So what did the Republicans do? They are proposing that on the weekend before the election, that you can't drop into your clerk's office and put the ballot in the ballot box.
Why?
What'd you say?
I said why. I don't. I'm asking you a question to explain the unexplainable.
It will help reduce the number of voters, and isn't that the goal here? Is to reduce the number of voters. You recall that this last election in November, some of the counties, because they work all that weekend before the election, of course, left their doors wide open and told everybody, hey, yeah, if you've got your mail ballot, bring it on down. Let us get it in the box. Let us start getting it counted. And the Republicans filed lawsuits. They lost, but they filed lawsuits saying you can't do that. Well, of course in. And they now they're trying to ban it so that the clerks who are working that weekend cannot accept ballots on those days.
Here's a 3-minute question because I have 3 minutes. Where is Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger on this? Has he or his spokesperson Gabriel Sterling, have they said anything about legislation like that? I mean, they should be weighing in on this, right? I mean, that's part of their role.
I have not seen anything that they have said on this. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I would guess that they will have a representative in today's 5 p.m. meeting for the committee that's going to hear this bill. Let's see if they say anything. But I've not seen them say anything publicly. My guess is they're not going to fight the Republicans on voter suppression efforts. You had mentioned Senator Burns at having this idea on only one voting place in early voting. He's the one who commented in the press, but we don't actually know who drafted this bill.
Huh?
No, you notice it didn't have a name on it. And what was circulated is there is no name on it, but it was put out to officials. It was actually even put out to local election officials, county election officials, as the bill that would be heard. So we actually don't know who fathered this idea.
That shouldn't be allowed either. Put your name on it. Like, that should not be allowed either.
And it shouldn't be allowed that they come in with a 27-page bill that nobody's had a chance to read, nobody's had a chance to study or talk to the experts, and then they have to vote on it. That's what happened yesterday about paper ballots.
Yeah, and I know we want to talk about hand-marked paper ballots, and you and I have talked about this before, and you have surmised, and I think pretty correctly, that Democrats haven't always been on the right side of this issue. But then again, I mean, I'm seeing some inexplicable activity from Democrats this legislative session on other issues, the tort reform measure that passed by a razor-thin margin with Democratic voter support. I don't understand some of what's going on this legislative session. If there were some horse trading going on, that I see some benefit coming to the Democratic Party on some issues that they like, I can understand it. But they're not getting anything, and I don't understand. Whatever. Listen, we got to take a quick break. We've got about 30 seconds left, so we're going to pick up on this conversation on Georgia election laws and integrity and what the General Assembly is doing, not doing, taking us backwards on, with Marilyn Marks, Executive Director from the Coalition for Good Governance. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show here on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. And yes, by the way, for those tuning in, there's plenty more to discuss about the signal kerfuffle and the reaction to it from media far and wide. We'll get to that next half hour.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
This from Senator Jason Estevez yesterday about, I'd say, noon or so. Take a listen.
Hey, y'all, I'm here at the state capitol, and I want y'all to reach out to your state representative and state senator and tell them that HB 397 is bad for democracy. It's bad for Georgia. What the bill does, amongst a lot of other bad things, is that it restricts counties to only having one early voting location for the entire county. That means people would have to drive over an hour and wait hours in line just to early vote. The vast majority of Georgians vote early, and this bill would make it nearly impossible, which means that we would go back to relying on day of election day voting. And if you think back to 2008, Obama, where people had to wait 3 to 4 hours just to vote on the day of the election, that is what the Georgia GOP is trying to do to Georgia elections. They're trying to take us back to 2008. So please reach out to your state senator. Please reach out to your state representative and tell them that this bill, HB 397, which is being heard in committee today, is bad for Georgia.
So that is Senator Jason Estevez, who I have put on my short list for 2026 Georgia gubernatorial, but that's just me. And it's my understanding that there is a little bit of a exploratory committee flirtation going on there. So there may be some seriousness to that. We're with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance. There was a time when I could rest easy when I would hear something from the Democratic Party. Oh, contact your representative, contact your senator. Like I could go to sleep at night going, like, I don't need to contact my representative because I know where my representative stands because I live in a safe blue district. But there have been some inexplicable crossing over on some measures this cycle that maybe I do need to reach out to my representative or my senator just to make sure that we're on the same page here. One thing that you and the Coalition for Good Governance has been working towards is to see to it that Georgia embraces the concept of going back to hand-marked paper ballots. Where are we on that? I know there's been some committee discussion on this and some legislative movement.
And now we are still awaiting our decision from the federal court, where we are trying to have the touchscreen machines banned, just like we had the previous version of the touchscreen machines banned, and the judge declared them unconstitutional. We're still awaiting that decision. But in the meantime, the legislature yesterday began to take this up somewhat seriously for the first time. And Senator Burns brought an amendment to a bill where it did permit hand-marked paper ballots. It was heard yesterday, not voted on. There were problems in the bill's drafting. But the good news, Ron, is that the Democrats on the Senate Ethics Committee seem to come around, led by Senator Estevez, by the way. And I would also say Senator Kim Jackson. They were very open to the idea of using hand-marked paper ballots. They understood that hand-marked paper ballots create the permanent record of the voter's intent and safeguard against the software manipulating the recording of the vote. And to remind your listeners, recall that in 2021, Trump allies stole Georgia's voting software and distributed it to people all in the United States and, internationally as well. A lot of bad actors have Georgia's software in their hand that can easily manipulate an election without detection. And neither party has been willing to do anything to mitigate that extreme danger.
Is it because Fox News had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in a lawsuit to Dominion that
No.
folks are just afraid to speak ill of Dominion?
No, because the software is flawed, and that has been proven by expert after expert after expert. Nobody even refutes that it is flawed software. I think that the hesitation on the Republican side is that they would have to call out Trump and his allies for stealing and distributing the software.
Okay.
And they don't want that, right?
No, I mean, I get that, but even on the left, I mean, there's been a hesitance to speak ill of touchscreen voting.
Right. But, I think, remember that it was the Democrats who solidly, in a party line vote, voted in 2019 against buying these machines. They were totally against buying these machines.
Okay.
But then when Biden won in such a narrow margin in Georgia, they immediately ran to the defense of the machines and have been unable to even take into account the theft of the software. They have just gotten so defensive of the machines that they're having a very hard time being objective and saying, yeah, he won, but since that time, the software's been stolen. More has been proven about the vulnerability of the machines. Therefore, we should not use them. They've had a hard time moving off that point, despite the unified opinion of all of the cybersecurity experts that they should not be used in public elections.
I worry that Democrats have painted themselves into a corner by doing just that. Again, after the results of the 2020 election were made public and being verified and certified and this, that, and the other, Democrats had to defend the results against an onslaught of, the big lie, essentially. And so anything that Democrats may have felt contributed to the outcome, they have put themselves in a position of needing to defend when, I mean,
right.
It's like defending the fact that it was sunny in Pennsylvania that day. No, there wasn't a 30% chance of rain that day. It was completely sunny and 74. Stop. That's not why. I mean, not everything contributed to the outcome. I mean, you had a very highly unpopular incumbent president at the time who had fumbled a pandemic and in the throes of that destroyed the economy. I mean, there are valid reasons why the Americans voted in the numbers that they did to oust him. So just accept that and move on. You and I have talked about this too a little bit off the show. There's been some noise made, and I understand the basis of it about the outcome of the 2024 election and the validity of it. I mean, there are organizations that are making and raising some valid questions, but Democrats are in this position now where they can't say a thing about it because they refuted it for 4 years when it came from the right. And they don't want to look like hypocrites. I mean, I don't understand why. Republicans bathe in hypocrisy out in the open and flaunt it, and Democrats can't be bothered to ask, hey, what was up with Trump on the campaign trail saying, I don't need your vote, and Elon Musk looking at his phone and going on social media and saying it's a wrap long before states were called, and bomb threats at voting locations in Georgia and in Pennsylvania and in other swing states, I'm sure. And I see we can't even raise this question now because we don't want to, be
right
raising questions about the outcome. But shouldn't we raise questions about the outcome? It was kind of, I mean, I'm not saying that the polls didn't show that it was going to be a tight race and won by, such razor thin margins. But there are some questions about who were in the rooms when these bomb threats were called in and folks were evacuated? Did somebody keep an eye on the machines?
So the answer is so simple, Ron. The answer is so simple, and that is not just Georgia, but every state. You know what? Our elections should be fair that the public should be able to verify who won, right?
Yeah.
It ought to be simple. But in Georgia, we have a system that, you cannot ever tell who won because it's done on hackable computers. In other states, including North Carolina, where I vote, the public is never allowed to see the ballots or the ballot images, so there's no way we can verify it. In Pennsylvania, it's pretty much the same way. You take swing state after swing state, and there is so much obstruction to permitting the public to verify their elections that we have to pull back and say, isn't that the simple answer? To have verifiable elections where how the votes were counted is not kept secret from the people.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody else has thought of this because I'm not the brightest man on the planet. If I voted on a hand-marked paper ballot and turned it in and it was counted, et cetera, and so on, there is, by the way, the technology to just scan these things and have them stored on a cloud server somewhere so that we can go back and log in and see that, there's my ballot. That's what I voted. And look, it got counted. We can do this, right?
We never want a voter to be able to prove his ballot or how he voted, because that will turn into coercion, right?
Yeah, you're right.
The boss says, okay, I want you to show me how you voted.
Yeah.
No, don't want that. But we do want you to be able to go in and add up all the votes in your precinct and say, there were 1,000 votes for Harris and 800 for Trump. Yep, I can tabulate them. The problem is that in Georgia, while we can do that, and thank goodness to bipartisan legislation brought by Democrat Shay Roberts and Republican Shaw Blackman some years ago, those ballot images are public in Georgia, in one of the few states that does permit that. However, our problem is that a computer recorded those votes, and we don't know what the voter intended. When you pressed Harris on the touchscreen, we don't really know, what the computer did. Did the computer print it out for Trump? You would have probably checked, but the vast majority of voters do not check to see what got printed out on that ballot.
Yeah, okay. That I completely understand. But you know what? I'm going to push back a little bit. Like, I do want to be able to log in and see that my ballot looked exactly the way I wanted it to and that it was counted. Whether or not I've got I get the boss looking over the shoulder thing, but that should be punishable by, a prison sentence, a minimum prison sentence, and just, make that just I don't know. That's just me, and I feel like MAGA, big life folks would probably want that too. I just feel like there might be.
They do want that. They do want that, and I will disagree with you on that.
Sure.
Having watched coercion, particularly with mail ballots in Colorado, where everybody votes by mail, I watched too much coercion of people who are in difficult economic circumstances.
Sure.
Literally, where the head of Head Start was requiring mothers to show them their ballots before they let the children into Head Start. If it's the only place that you can get your child into preschool, you're going to show your ballot. You're not going to turn in that person. Just like I've watched spouses, women, their husbands force them to vote a certain way.
Yeah.
A boss, I mean, no, because people will be are taken advantage of, and they are not going to go turn in their boss where they're depending on that job.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I do. I wish there was some sort of I don't know, a secure way to do that.
But we have a very good alternative, and that is if we have good oversight by poll watchers and party representatives of the entire process from the time you put that ballot in the scanner to the time the election results are certified, and we do audits that all of the ballots got counted right. We don't need to know which one was yours. We don't want to know which one was yours. You don't need to be able to point that out. You can be confident in the oversight process that all the ballots, including yours, got counted right.
So let's wrap here real quick. We're going back to discussing House Bill 397, which originally was intended to deal with seating or unseating folks on the state election board. And here at the 11th hour, Republicans have added some language to the bill to limit early voting in every Georgia county of whatever size to one location, one day. Whether it's Screven County with 14,000 people, and I'm sure like maybe 6,000 registered voters, or Fulton County with its hundreds of thousands of residents and hundreds of thousands of registered voters. And we are obviously not good. We're not cool with that. We can't be cool with that, especially when you have 71% of the state being early voting, having early voted last cycle over a 2-week period, and the brunt of the county or the state's population living in Metro Atlanta, where counties are in the hundreds of thousands of residents. It's just not a good thing. So you said there's going to be a committee hearing on that today, late this afternoon, like 5 o'clock. Why so late? That's so
5 o'clock, yeah. And it'll be publicly broadcast so that the public can watch it. We will see if they stick with what their proposal was yesterday, or if they've gotten enough pushback that maybe they're modifying it. It'll be interesting to see.
That's going to be the Georgia Senate YouTube and the Ethics Committee, right?
That's right.
All right. Marilyn Marks, always doing the yeoman's work. And by the way, I mean, y'all, she is up like 21 hours of the day. I don't know how you sleep. You must be running on coffee. But God bless you and your organization for staying vigilant across this state and all 50 states to make sure that elections have some semblance of fairness despite all of these obstacles. Thank you for joining the Ron Show today.
Thank you so much, Ron.
All right, final few minutes of today's Ron Show. By the way, there is another election topic to discuss, and that is what will be the largest voter purge in American history when the Secretary of State's office purges 455,000 voters from the rolls just because they haven't participated. I believe it's in the last 5 years. Let me read from the article that Mark Neese posted. Mark Neese posted at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution a day or so ago. Election officials plan to cancel about 455,000 inactive voter registrations this summer, one of the largest registration removals in U.S. history. More than half of the registrations scheduled for cancellation were identified by a 24-state organization called ERIC, which reports when a voter has moved and is no longer eligible to vote in Georgia. To me, that's like, okay, if they've moved out of the state of Georgia, they should not be on voter rolls. And there should be some mechanism for doing that, especially if you, say, lived in Georgia and then moved to Texas and decided you wanted to run for Senate back in Georgia. We should have a mechanism for that, right? It's just sort of curious that ERIC exists in a bipartisan fashion, a nonpartisan fashion, actually, to increase access to registration, reduce election costs, and increase efficiencies in election. That sounds really dozy, right? Why are conservatives against ERIC? Here in Georgia, where not all elected officials are MAGA, some conservatives actually do like Eric. State Elections Director Blake Evans said the size of this year's registration removal process shows that Eric, the Election Registration Information Center, works. He said, we want to do everything we can within the law to have the cleanest voter list possible. Eric is the best tool out there right now that gives us valuable information you can't get anywhere else. Of the 455,000 registrations targeted for removal, most belong to people who appear to have moved either by filling out change of address forms, registering to vote in another state, or getting a driver's license in another state. In response to conservative opposition to Eric, Republican legislators introduced a bill this year to withdraw Georgia from the organization. 9 other Republican-run states have quit Eric in recent years, including Alabama, Florida, and Texas. The proposal stalled in the Georgia House, but could be revived. In addition to the voters found by Eric who have moved, another 100,000 registrations set for cancellation belong to voters who haven't even participated in Georgia elections for the last 9 years or longer. I don't have a problem with that either. Through Georgia's Use It or Lose It law, voters lose their registration if they don't have any contact with election officials for 5 years and then miss 2 general elections. Voting rights advocates said that they're concerned that eligible voters could lose their registrations and their ability to vote. You shouldn't be taken off the rolls because you didn't vote, according to Helen Butler, executive director for the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda, a civil rights organization. When you look at the voter registration statistics, there are a lot of people registered to vote who just don't make it to the polls because they're dissatisfied with the choices. They decide not to vote, and that's their right. Here's where I'm going to make some liberals mad. Yes, absolutely true. But over a 5-year period, there has to be someone you are satisfied with. Listen, I get the distrust when the right side controls election data like this and is pilfering through. I get it. I get the distrust, but I also understand the rationale for removing inactive voters over a period of time, or after a period of time, and to eliminate the potential for any sort of misuse or fraud. That's just me. And again, if I had Marilyn back on the phone, she and I might disagree on that. Probably would disagree on that. There's been some broad agreement, I think, across the ideological spectrum that the Signal chat conversation situation was a massive up. The guy owning the up is White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who went on Laura Ingraham last night, and she actually pressed him.
So your staffer did not put his contact information.
No,
but how did it end up in your
that's
phone?
What we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem.
That's what we've got the best technical minds, right?
That's disturbing.
And that's where, I mean, I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then then somehow it gets
someone
sucked
sent
in.
You that
it gets
contact.
sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was on the chat?
So the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
Can I give you a theory? I think Mike Waltz is unnamed Trump administration source. It's the only valid reason I can surmise that he and Goldberg may have had each other's contact information in the first place. Also, you can actually tell that this caught MAGA and right-wing media completely by surprise because they're not on the same page. In fact, Ronnie Chang at The Daily Show last night pointed out just how disparate their responses have been.
Everyone is yelling at them about this breach of national security or whatever, and the Department of Defense is having trouble defending themselves. Luckily, all of MAGA is there to help them. Counter-argument 1.
Well, it's a mistake. You know, we make mistakes. We all make mistakes.
But somebody made a mistake, and that happens.
Yeah, look, it's a mistake, and we got to move on.
Well, it was a mistake. Like I said before, it was a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes.
Is that sufficient accountability to you to recognize that someone made a mistake and moving on? Because I don't see that same standard being held
Boris,
when other people have made...
I gave you the soundbite already. I gave you the soundbite already.
Boris, I gave you the soundbite. Stop asking follow-up questions. If I wanted to talk to a journalist, I'd be on a private group chat with Pete Hegseth. Okay? This feels like a major up, and they're acting like nobody will care about this. And honestly, they're probably right. I mean, nothing seems to matter anymore anyway. And everyone will forget this in a few days when Trump sends the new Snow White to Gitmo. And even if they didn't accidentally add a journalist into this group chat, they weren't supposed to be talking about this stuff on Signal in the first place, okay? Signal might be a good app for you and me and our local drug dealer, but it's not for the Pentagon to plan wars on.
One former White House official told Politico their personal phones are all hackable, and it's highly likely that foreign intelligence services are sitting on their phones watching them type the shit out.
But if you're not satisfied with it was just a mistake, they have another defense. It was just a mistake. That was awesome.
The bigger takeaway for me is it's an insight, a transparent insight into the thought process and dialogue of our national leaders. If you read the content of these messages, I think you'll come away proud that these are the leaders making these decisions in America.
What you did see, though, I think, was top-level officials doing their job, doing it well, and executing on a plan with precision.
Precision? I mean, even your texts weren't hitting the intended targets, right? Just to summarize, the Trump administration admitted this happened, but it was a small mistake, and it was a good thing that it happened. But also, what if the reporter made the whole thing up?
Not a good reporter.
See,
Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around.
I happen to know the guy's a total sleazebag.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. This is a guy that peddles in garbage.
You can't use it was a mistake and it was fake news. You gotta pick one, okay? You gotta get together and figure it out, okay? But not in a group chat. No more group chats.
That'll do it for today's Ron Show. Thank you for listening. We air weekdays 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. My thanks to Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, for joining us today. See you tomorrow. Have a great one.